Hey folks, Dr. Lava here. Well, last time I talked about Generation 5's Lost Special event centered around the lock capsule. And this time I'll be reporting on scrapped monster designs that ended up going unused in Pokemon Black and White. In total, I'll be covering 18 lost Pokemon, about half of them in today's episode, and the other half next time in episode 22. In order to uncover most of these unused designs, I commissioned translations of a series of Japanese interviews in which lead Pokemon designer Ken Sugimori details the origins of every creature that was introduced in Generation 5. These interviews were originally published in several issues of Nintendo Dream magazine in 2011, but had never been fully translated into English until now. In these interviews, Sugimori provides page after page of details on Black and White's development, including early designs for lots of Pokemon that did make into Black and White, as well as information about a few monsters that were scrapped entirely. Several of these lost Pokemon do have official beta sprites or concept art, but for most of them, all we have are Ken Sugimori's descriptions. So the majority of the artwork you'll be seeing will be artists' interpretations of the information contained in these interviews. So let's go ahead and get started, and take a look at some Pokemon designs that never made their way into Black and White version. In Nintendo Dream magazine volume 205, Sugimori reveals that Dino, Zweilous, and Hydreigon were initially a family of tank dragons. And although he doesn't say this explicitly, it seems likely that their original typing was half dragon and half steel. But Sugimori says they weren't satisfied with these designs, so the tank dragons were put on ice. But then later in development, orders came down from the game's planners requesting a powerful 3-stage dragon family, so the designs were resurrected and revised. Sugimori goes on to explain that while developing Hydreigon, the designers drew inspiration from the Yamada no Orochi, a mythical 8-headed and 8-tailed Japanese dragon, and that during the revision process, there was a point where Hydreigon also possessed 8 heads. But the design team was displeased with how it turned out, so they revised Hydreigon again and ultimately decided on the design that we know today, whose silhouette still retains the appearance of an 8-headed dragon. But interestingly, Sugimori points out that the purple tread marks on the bellies of the final designs are leftovers from the days when they were still a family of tank dragons. In volume 204, Sugimori tells us that the original concept for the Litwick family was a flame that evolved into a candle, then into a lamp. But ultimately, the idea that a flame would evolve into a candle just wasn't working for them. So the design team threw out the family's initial flame stage, and they added a chandelier at the end of the evolutionary line in order to maintain the family's 3-stage concept. Presumably, artwork for this unused flame creature is still collecting dust somewhere at Game Freak headquarters, which is most likely the case for all these lost Pokemon designs. In this series of interviews, Sugimori only briefly touches on the Sawsbuck family, explaining that even though their final designs were shaped around the concept of seasons, Sawsbuck was originally created before the seasons mechanic even existed. As far as I can tell, concept art depicting that early Sawsbuck design was never exhibited in the West, but it was once displayed for exactly 4 seconds at a school festival in Tokyo in late 2010. More specifically, it was shown at Meiji University in a slideshow that also included concept art for Generation 5's characters and locations. The only known recording of this slideshow is of extremely low resolution, but together with my friend Luminosis over at Helix Chamber, we were able to enhance it to get a better look at what appears to be the early Sawsbuck design that Sugimori was referring to. As you can see, the artwork is dated January of 2009, almost 2 years before Black and White first released in Japan. The creature in the sketch is identified as Neko Yagi, which translates into English as root goat. It's described as a dual-type grass and ground Pokemon, with fur that's made out of roots and whose horns appear to begin as budding seeds, then sprout into leaves, and then finally into tree saplings. Considering the phases of progression displayed, it seems likely that at this point in development, the design was meant as a 2 or even 3-stage evolutionary line, which given proper artwork probably would have looked something like this. But in a later stage of development, Game Freak decided to implement the concept of seasons, and as a result, we ended up with the Sawsbuck family that we know today. Before moving on though, I think I should note that Nekoyagi may have actually been split into two separate families of Pokemon, the Sawsbuck line in Generation 5 and the Go-Goat line in Generation 6. But considering the date of the sketch and its similarities with Sawsbuck, in particular the horns, I think it's safe to say that the root goat was most likely the design Sugimori was referring to when he said the original Sawsbuck existed prior to the implementation of seasons. In Volume 204's interview, Sugimori reveals that Stunfisk was originally blue, dual-type water and electric, and based on a goosefish. A goosefish is a type of deep-sea angler that can live at depths over 3,000 feet, camouflaging itself in the mud and the sand on the ocean's floor. The designer's initial concept was to create the world's flattest Pokemon, so a bottom dweller like a goosefish would have made perfect sense. But during the game's balancing phase, the water and electric typing was revised to ground and electric, and he was transformed from a blue goosefish into a brown flounder. In Volume 205, while describing the design origins of Heatmore and Durant, Sugimori mentions an idea for a creature that his team has long wanted to make into a Pokemon, but to this day, still hasn't gotten the chance to make into a canonical monster. While Stunfisk was designed as the flattest Pokemon, reportedly, Sugimori's team has long wanted to create an ant that could serve as the world's smallest Pokemon. While that's certainly an interesting concept, it's pretty clear why it still hasn't become a reality. It just doesn't make intuitive sense for something as small as an ant to engage in battle against even an average-sized Pokemon like Pikachu, let alone winning in such a battle. And if that indeed is the issue that's been stopping them all these years, the design team's idea for the world's smallest Pokemon will most likely remain as nothing more than just an idea. This next one doesn't come from a Sugimori interview, but from the very first trailer for Generation 5 that was released in Japan. In the summer of 2010, Black and White's first trailer aired on a children's TV show called Ohasuta, which in English means good morning. The Ohasuta trailer gave fans their first sneak peek at several Gen 5 Pokemon, including Excadrill. But unlike all the other Pokemon in the trailer, the early sprite for Excadrill bore some notable differences compared to the one that ended up in the game's release version. Specifically, Beta Excadrill's body was purple instead of brown, and his belly pattern was hot pink rather than red, and it was also mirrored left to right. But there's been some misinformation regarding the Ohasuta trailer that's been spread over the years, with some people claiming that quality issues with the video itself are the cause of Beta Excadrill's apparent differences in color. However, I inspected several recordings of Ohasuta and compared the colors of the Pokemon in the trailer to their colors in the game's final build. And based on that, I can say with certainty that Beta Excadrill's appearance was not distorted by quality issues, and that he did in fact exhibit these differences before his design was altered and finalized for Black and White's release versions. Okay, if you enjoyed this episode, you might want to subscribe so you don't miss out on the rest of this series, including the next episode, which will feature 10 more unused Pokemon designs. At the time of this recording, I've managed to locate and translate interviews covering 104 of the 156 origin stories of Gen 5 Pokemon. The remaining magazines I'm still trying to track down from whatever rock they're hiding under somewhere in Japan. Once I've located and translated the origin stories of the last 52 Pokemon, I'll come back later this year and produce a third Betamon episode covering those revelations as well. If you would like to read all these Sugimori interviews for yourself in their entirety, you can find them all on my website, lavacutcontent.com. I'd like to give a big thanks to my Patreon supporters. These videos are only possible with their support, which help pay for the translations, as well as original artwork by the likes of Grace Craft, Rachel Briggs, and Nick Cron. So if you want to see more research-heavy original content, I ask that you please consider signing up to support the channel for a few bucks a month. It helps to make sure that I can continue producing translations as well as videos just like this one. If this episode contained any factual errors, I'll leave corrections and clarifications in this video's description, along with a list of all my sources. Alright, that about does it. Thanks for watching, folks. See you next time.